Where to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Today we're going to talk about one-size-fits-all schooling. Now, look, schooling is a good thing. No one is suggesting that kids need to be worked in the salt mines or otherwise kept in the dark. We all want to see them develop to their potential. But why is it that when it comes to government-run schools, I'll call it public schools after this, but I need to make sure we understand. Public schools are schools run by the government, paid for by the taxpayers. Why is it that this one-size-fits-all mentality seems to hold sway? We'll explore that next.
A press club are biased all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Know Where to Hide. You know, it's always touchy talking about public education because there's this mentality that kicks in when you question the wisdom of, well, is this something that must be entrusted to the state and the state alone? That's when people start to jump to conclusions like, oh, so you're against education entirely. And the implication here is that, well, if the state wasn't educating these kids, nobody else would do it. Now, there's nothing that could be further from the truth, but isn't it interesting how what once was a focus on teaching, reading, writing, arithmetic, the basic skills of how to communicate, how to think, how to measure, how to function as far as an educated person, those things are kind of giving way to agendas. And I'm not just talking the woke agenda, but it's got a pretty strong toehold. Now, it seems like we're seeing some mission creep in school to where school is actually becoming a sanctuary of sort. It's like home, away from home. It's your family. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we start to hear slogans like everything within the school system, nothing without the school system. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Mussolini, you might look up a few of his speeches. He had something very similar to say. Now, here's an article. Actually, we're going to rely on a couple of articles here from KTVB. Channel 7 has provided us with some great material here. Here's an article from June 11th. Beginning next school year, Boise schools will provide free breakfast to all students. Starting in the 24-25 school year, Boise schools will provide free breakfast for all students. Select schools will also offer free lunches. Now, on the surface, that's got to sound pretty good, right? Wow, one less thing I have to worry about. It's tough enough getting the kids up, getting them ready for school. And I want you to see some of the official justification that goes into why is it right and proper for the Boise School District to be offering these free breakfasts to the kids. On the taxpayers' dime, okay? Nothing is free, just so we're clear on that. So the article tells us Boise School District board members approved a new initiative Tuesday to better serve BSD students and their well-being. Well, there's no end to doing good like that, now is there? Beginning in the 2024-2025 school year, Boise schools will be offering free breakfast for all students within the district. And the initiative is part of the district's budget for the upcoming school year, according to a statement from the Boise School District. Starting with the 2024-2025 school year, all of our students will have access to a nutritious breakfast at no cost, ensuring that they can start their day off right. That's Boise School Board President Dave Wagers. In a news release, the board came to the decision based on the recommendation from district administration, stating the initiative will bring numerous benefits, including academic performance and improved general overall health. I mean, that sounds very lofty. Who could possibly be against that? But there are a couple things I'd like you to consider. Number one question that has to be asked anytime someone has an initiative that's going to do all the good in the world, we have to ask the question, paid for by whom? Well, in this case, it's the taxpayers. So specifically, those taxpayers who fund the Boise School District. Now, maybe some of them are okay with this, but really, they don't have a lot of say as taxpayers, do they? So, I mean, there could be a lot more added to it, and the taxpayers are still going to be on the hook for it. Just because it's taxpayer-funded doesn't necessarily mean that's the best or wisest use of taxpayer dollars. But also, there's the issue of, okay, so, now we're offering breakfast? Does this mean we have an expectation that their school day is going to start even earlier? I mean, for that matter, maybe we should just, have little bunks set aside and teachers or teachers' aides to read them a story and tuck them into bed at night, and they can just live there, during the week. After all, there's nothing more important than a well-rested, well-fed student, right? In a safe environment. Okay, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here. Wagers said breakfast is often referred to as the most important meal of the day, and this holds especially true for students before they begin their academic day. Okay, how much time is spent on academics versus how much of it is spent on indoctrination into the latest climate change scare or the latest woke nonsense. I'm just saying, if it was all academics, you might get some better agreement, but it's not. So let's not pretend that it is. By providing free breakfast to all of our students, we are not only promoting health and well-being, but here it comes, creating a more inclusive and supportive learning environment. Wave the flag, kids, wave the flag. It's inclusive. And it doesn't just stop with breakfast. And this is the concern that many people like myself would have. In the upcoming school year, a handful of schools can expect to see both free breakfast and free lunch. Paid for by whom? That's right, the taxpayers. And there's a whole list of schools. I won't give you the whole list, but you can get the idea. It's a fairly lengthy list. I'm guessing probably 12, 15 different schools within the Boise School District. Now, Christy Smith is Boise School District's Food and Nutrition Services Supervisor. Christy says, providing free breakfast normalizes school meals. Did you catch that? Normalizing being fed by the school. I mean, that's great and everything, and it's better than, okay, we've got to ship them home for lunch and whatnot, but we're talking about more than one meal at school. So it's not a far stretch to say, okay, we're going to normalize breakfast. Then at some point, I guess we'll normalize dinner. And again, how long before we're tucking them into their beds at night and reading them a story right there at school? It helps to eliminate the stigma that school meals are for low-income students. And it also keeps their little butts in the school a lot longer. And isn't that part of the funding formula? Oh, we'll get to that in just a few minutes. This new initiative aims to reduce food insecurity among students and sends an important message to our students and families that good nutrition is critical to a healthy student and a healthy learning environment. I mean, the only thing that's missing there is, it sounds a little bit cliched, it's part of a balanced breakfast. For crying out loud. Look, I have no doubt that there are some good intentions here, but the question has to be asked, is this really a proper function of what schools should be doing? Yes, it may be helpful to some. Maybe even a lot of people will like it. It doesn't make it necessarily, though, a good or proper use of taxpayer dollars. And for that matter, if there were kids experiencing food insecurity, we all pay a lot of taxes that we don't see necessarily up front. Maybe if we were to, somehow slow the roll of the Leviathan that is state government and its thirst for more taxes so that it can do more good for us and bless us even more in our lives, well, we'd have money to keep for ourselves and maybe even meet our own needs. It just seems like there's a degree of learned helplessness that is coming about because of this. And I'm not trying to cast total aspersions on the intentions of those who are pushing this, but I'm not sure that they really have the absolute best of intentions in mind and think maybe there's something more to this along the lines of it also enhances, our ability and our availability and access to your child even more so than we already enjoy. Now, here's what's interesting. Here's a story from just yesterday, and it's about where are all the public school students going? Now, you're going to be hearing a lot about school choice in the upcoming legislative session come the first part of next year. That's because we have seen a very clear shift toward a more conservative legislature, unless something, some virus comes along that only wipes out those who favor freedom or school choice or conservative principles. It's very likely it's going to be back on the menu and very likely could pass in some way, shape, or form, which will be very difficult for people who are part of that public school system, which tend to treat the system as if it exists for a jobs program for teachers and administrators rather than a place where kids would go to learn. They don't want competition. You'll see that in this story. So here's KTVB asking the question, where are all the public school students going? Some districts close their doors due to low enrollment, but other schools have waiting lists. Where are they going? I can tell you one thing that they're not going to even hint at in this story, and that is somewhere outside of the government-run school system. So the article says some schools are closing because of low enrollment. It's quite a change after years of districts not being able to keep up with growth and build schools fast enough. Also, other schools are full with kids on waiting lists. Where are the students going? What does it mean for all of kids' education in this area? Well, 4 schools have now closed in the Nampa School District, and Idaho Superintendent of Public Instruction, Debbie Critchfield, knows it was a decision that district leaders had to make, though, because of a plummet in enrollment. She said, I know that any decision to close a school is taken very seriously. Nampa lost more than 11% of its student population in the past decade. And Critchfield said that's a big change from the early 90s or the 90s and early 2000s. There was a period of time when we couldn't build schools fast enough. Well, times have changed, apparently. So now there is a different challenge. The Idaho Department of Education said while the state's overall population has grown, Idaho lost over 29,000 K through 12 students since the 2013-2014 school year. Now, you might guess COVID had a lot to do with that, and we'll get to that in a few moments. But Dan Holler, the public affairs administrator for the Boise School District, says that's having an impact on public schools. In the past year, Boise saw a drop in their enrollment of a little more than 2%. And while they're not closing any schools, they were very curious as to what was happening. Okay, and probably rightly so. So research says because of a declining birth rate in Idaho and Ada County, rising home prices, and a lack of affordable housing. The gentrification of parts of the district, which is displacing people, the fact that older adults are moving in who do not have school-age children. Okay, those are all good reasons too, but I still haven't heard anybody, hinting at the idea that maybe they found something that actually suits their kids better. Gee, I wonder why that is that KTVB wouldn't mention this. Holler says more parents are chasing lower home prices by moving well outside Boise, which is why you see Valley View's enrollment growing. Enrollment is also growing at charter schools across the state. They've added 13,000 students in the past decade. Holler says it's not just the traditional high school anymore. It's a comprehensive public school system that meets the needs of all students. But notice it's public. It can only be public to meet the needs of all students. But understanding that that's an evolving thing, that as our technology changes and as we see needs change, that we need to be responsive to that as well. And of course, we're committed to that, as long as it's within the public school system. So why are kids moving from traditional public schools to charter public schools? I mean, it's okay, but it's still within that public school system. Critchfield says, I don't want to attach everything to COVID, but there are some definite differences pre and post COVID. And actually, the answer she gives here makes a pretty fair amount of sense in terms of how COVID affected why some parents took their kids out of school. Critchfield says during the pandemic, families enjoyed more choice and flexibility with how and where their kids went to school. Okay, fair enough. They don't want to give that up. So the superintendent wants the Department of Education to meet those needs and to be flexible too, up to a point. And that point is you don't take your kids out of the public school system. You just find some hybrid within the public school system that better mimics what it is you're looking for. It's competition without competition, right? As long as it stays within the system. We want the parents to find the right fit for their child without any type of regulation from the government saying, this is where your child has to get it to get their learning. And yet in practice, that's exactly what they're saying. You have to find it within the public school system. But at the same time, public schools feel really hamstrung that there are things they can't do or they have to do. And there are other environments which have more flexibility. A big part of that flexibility is in regard to attendance, which is tied to funding. This is one of the biggest reasons why public schools don't like to see students exercise their choice. They don't like to see school choice and students going somewhere other than the public school system because the funding formula depends on little butts sitting in those seats in order to justify the budget. I'm sorry to reduce it to that, but if you've ever heard from a parent who moved into a school district and was treated with disdain, well, we don't even get credit for your child being here because, it's too late. They're not going to count in the funding formula. That's an example. And no, it doesn't happen everywhere, but sometimes you'll find the occasional school administrator who actually admits that, usually with a little huff of disgust. Also, as preferences change, so do perceptions of charter schools. Now, Critchfield said there's much less of an adversarial relationship. Well, of course, they're different heads on the same beast, but charters are already factored into funding distribution, and a new law will ensure that charters are also not pulling facilities funding from traditional schools either. It's an incestuous relationship, but it's still part of the public school system. We really are at a place where we can now say we're not competing charter to traditional because they don't want competition, that there are ways to satisfy the needs at the basic level anyway of both of those systems. Again, without offering real choice to the parents who are actually looking for educational choice. Now, all of that sounds good, but people are still going to worry anytime schools close like they did in Nampa. Are we going to see more of that? Critchfield says, so I can only be sure of one thing, and that is that education in Idaho will continue to change. We have to be prepared. Change is a part of education, and we're okay with that. We want to be a part of the conversation. The only thing they really don't want to be part of that conversation is the idea that you should have the freedom to take your children outside of the public school system and either homeschool them or put them into a private school or something like that. The funding has been immense for Idaho's public schools. And frankly, the legislature, I think, has come up with they've been very creative, but they've come up with hundreds of millions of dollars. And many of these school districts are even sitting on surpluses of hundreds of millions of dollars, that are there just in case we need it. And yet the refrain is always the same. It's never enough. It's never, when are you going to fully fund the system? What is fully funded? What is that going to look like? Is that when 98 cents out of every dollar goes to the public school system? Because even then, I think there would be those who, well, it's close, but it's not good enough. So look at the schools now slowly starting to morph and become more and more like a part of your home life. Well, you can have breakfast here, and we have after-school programs. We have lunch here, and it's free for everybody. Free, right? Paid for by the taxpayer, which is kind of the point. Yes, it's distributing the costs, but it's also not giving people the choice that they really want. Public school may work very, very well for some students. There are some who really thrive in that structured environment, and there are others who don't. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in terms of school choice. I, for one, am very happy to see it come. I think competition will not only offer parents something more substantial than simply taxpayer-funded, goodies for their kids, including a bedtime story, but it will actually sharpen up the public schools to where they will be able, and they're going to have to, if they want to continue to attract students, they're going to have to step up their game and actually start producing the kind of competency that they promise they're going to have. Right now, based on the testing results, the promises are falling short. They've overpromised and underdelivered, but we're not supposed to talk about that. So there you have it. One size fits all schooling. As long as it's within the public school system, why, everything is going to be good and everything's going to be happy. But some people need something outside that system. And the day that they get it, there may not be free lunches involved, or there may not be free breakfasts involved, but the kids will actually be getting an education that's worth their time. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Press club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not